It Matters Radio. The gang's all here today. And the reason for that is we have a gentleman who is a guest who is so multi talented and he has so many interests and he helps artists in two ways. I'm not going to get into it right now. And what I'm going to do is turn this over to Kenneth Ween to introduce our guest.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to introduce Graham Sclater. Graham's not only a very talented man in many ways, but he's also a terrific friend to It Matters Radio. And Kerry, Monica, and I are just delighted to have him joining us all the way from across that big pond. He hails from Great Britain. So we're going to try very hard to put on our English hearing as we talk to Graham Sclater. Graham, good day.
Hi Ken, nice to be with you, Monica and Kerry. Yep, lovely indeed, always a pleasure.
Graham, who is Tabitha?
Okay, well, I'll try to keep it quick. When I was 21, 22, I came back from Germany and I set up a band here in Exeter in England, which played all original material. So it was organ, bass and drums, and I played the organ. Unfortunately, I became very ill with stomach ulcers and we had loads of dates booked, but I couldn't play them. So what we did is we decided that we would bring in a guitarist. I would drop out so they could carry on with the gigs. But but once we started rehearsing, or they started rehearsing, we realized that the music was so different that we needed a different name. And we were in a little cottage just outside of Exeter with the guitarist and his wife, and she literally flicked through a book and picked Tabitha. The band never played, everything, cancelled all the dates and everything else. And then within a few months, I started to get better. So I started writing songs and had a lot of interest making records. So I thought, well, what's an unusual name? And I decided to use Tabitha. A friend of mine designed the cat, which was the original cat playing bass guitar, which we've used on a lot of the vinyl releases. We've recently changed it for my recent book.
Mm-hmm. So Tabitha is a name out of a book that you have now centered upon to your publishing career, your writing career, your publishing career, of course, the spoken word part, and also producing music and producing CDs and back then vinyl. And you played the organ. Now, we have to immediately, that brings to mind one of your books. I think it was called something like Ticket to Ride.
Yes.
Yeah, would you like to talk a little bit about Ticket to Ride, why you wrote it, and what it's about? Because I think that's such a great story to start with.
Okay, well, in the 60s, I was 16 years old and I went to play in Germany. You needed to be 18 to actually go there. So for the first couple of years, I was absolutely terrified that the police, and they were very heavy over there at that time, would lock me up. George Harrison, they sent him home. He was 17, but I was 16. And what happened in Germany, at 10 o'clock, the police would go around the clubs and anyone under 18 had to leave. So you can imagine my problem being stuck on stage at 16 years old and wondering what the hell was going to happen if they were going to grab me and take me away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I lived there for 5 years. I played Hammond organ. I played in lots of bands. I worked with lots of brilliant musicians who've gone on to become very successful, and some were at the time. And so, fantastic time. So what I decided to do about 20 years ago, bearing in mind that was the 60s, so in the 80s, I decided to write the story based on things that happened to me and other guys around. But as I got deeper into it, I realized that I couldn't write it about me. I had to write it as a fiction project. So I changed names, changed certain things, and condensed it into 15 months. And that's where it went. I called it Ticket to Ride because the Beatles, I don't want to say it on air, but the Beatles, especially John Lennon, were incredibly clever. And if you've read the book, I know, Ken, there is a line in there that the bass player says, Reg asked him, he said, why the hell are you in Germany? And the guy says, well, it's a ticket to ride, and that's a double entendre. So that's why I called it that. But the Beatles were incredibly clever about some of their song titles, which, if you knew how they derived them, it would make people's hair curl, to be honest. But very, very, very clever indeed. So yeah, so it's Ticket to Ride is based on the 60s, and each chapter is a song title, which gives a clue to the content of that chapter.
Yes. Actually, that's something you do with a lot of your books. You have these wonderful song titles that you bring into the books as chapter titles.
Yeah, I do it in most of them, and the two I'm working on now, there'll be song titles for that. But what I do is, as I'm listening to the radio, listening to music, I pick out the songs that I think would suit, or if I like the title of the song, I write it down, and then when it comes to when I've actually finished the book or near to finishing it, then I start giving the chapters the titles that fit. I can't do it the other way around, obviously, so I've got a stockpile of song titles that I use, and also some for future books. One of my new books, about 3 on from today, is going to be called All or Nothing. And it's the Small Faces, and if you know the Small Faces, Stevie Marriott, who played with Humble Pie in America, but he's a guy from London. He's dead now. In fact, the whole band are dead apart from the drummer, unfortunately. But yeah, All or Nothing, fantastic song. And what it does, of course, is when people like yourselves are doing interviews, they actually will think, oh yeah, I like that song, and they actually play it. So it gives me a bit of added marketing, if you like.
I think that's an interesting idea. Of course, Monica, we're going to have to keep that in mind for future interviews, because I'm sure we're going to have Graham Sclater back.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Unless he
you
stops writing.
he's not going to stop writing.
No, he's not.
Gosh, no.
Enough,
And
enough,
I
enough.
mean, he's already talking 3 projects from now. So, Graham, are you also still writing music? And
No, no, I don't. I don't write music. To be honest, Ken, I think that's one thing too far for me. You know, I do get involved in music. Obviously, we'll talk about that later. But no, I don't write music. But what happens is if I mean, we're hopefully going to shoot a pilot for one of my TV series, which is called Buskers or Street Life, which is going to be my next novel anyway. But what I will do is work with an arranger, come songwriter, to work on the tracks. I won't write them, and I won't go down as a co-write. I don't think it's fair. You know, you put a couple of notes in and you go as a co-write and you take the credit with the original writer. I don't agree with that, but certainly I will work with them. I still play, and I will work with them to get what I want, you know, if it fits. If they do it well enough, then I won't interfere at all.
by the way, I want to just point out to our audience that that's one of the reasons that we at It Matters Radio love Graham. He's that kind of guy. He doesn't want to take advantage of people.
Right.
He wants to support other people. And that's part of what makes him such a favorite with us.
Right.
Now, I'm getting him to blush. That's wonderful.
I blushed earlier as well, but that's fine.
So, you know, Graham, your books show a lot of that sensitivity to people, and their emotions and their need. And one of the books that I was particularly struck by, and of course we've talked about before on It Matters Radio, has to do with what we here in the States call the War of 1812. It was a pesky little war for the British. But you wrote a very fine book about that, and I thought maybe we could get you to just talk a little bit about that book, which I'm just trying to remember the name.
Hatred is the key.
Yes. Hatred is the key.
Yes, hatred is the key.
Yeah, well, I was on the BBC this morning, our morning over here, and that came up as a subject actually. But Britain was at war with America for the second time in 1812.
Right.
It wasn't the War of Independence. A lot of people think that was it, but of course it wasn't. And the reason we were at war with yourselves, which is terrible, isn't it, was because the Americans were assisting the French, supplying timber for their ships.
Right.
The French ships were almost very similar, you know, so they're able to repair them very quickly. So we blockaded the East Coast, and I think the Americans declared war on us, but I'm not sure. And so therefore, we were having all these sea battles. Also in Canada, America wanted Canada back, but most of the battles were at sea, the majority. And what happened was we were capturing a lot of mariners, and we were bringing them back to England. And we had at that time what we called depots, which eventually became known as prisons. And very near to us, 12 miles, 14 miles away, fits in with the years, is a prison on a horrible part of, it's a beautiful place in the sun, but the weather changes over in an instant. You know, you get fog, you get mist swirling around. It's a pretty horrific place when it's like that. You've got bog, heather, the roads are all over the place across the moor. And what happened for nearly 10,000 unfortunate American seamen, they end up in a prison that was built for 3,000. And they were incarcerated for 2.5 years. But the rub of it is, the war actually finished on 1814 on Christmas Eve. And the British signed a treaty with America in Ghent, in Belgium. And everyone thought, that's it. The Americans now can all go home.
Right.
We can close the prison. Everyone's happy. Problem. The American government said, we're not paying to bring them back. The British government said, we're not paying to send them back. So they were kept in prison. So you can imagine they stopped their pay, which was a penny a day. What that would be relative to dollars, I don't know, but a penny a day. They stopped that. And these poor guys and the people who were guarding them, the wardens and everyone else, the militia, didn't want to be there. And it's one of the hardest winters that year for 100 years. There was shortage of food. They didn't get a lot anyway. And that went on for 3 months. And on April the 6th, 1815, they, I won't say rebelled, but they tried to break out. And someone, and nobody knows who it was, said they've got guns. And the British started firing at them. And there was a massacre. Mm-hmm. And the British paid a lot of money to those that were killed. The war was obviously well over. They went home, and we paid a lot in reparations to those American families. And we still get they call them the daughters of 1812, still come over here every so often. It's granddaughters, great-great-great-granddaughters, but they still have a pilgrimage to Dartmoor Prison, as it now is. Mm-hmm. So I call it faction, Ken. It's fact, but a lot of fiction, because obviously I wasn't there 200 years ago.
You weren't, but you did go out and camp on the moors so that you could get a better sense of what it was like.
Total. I went there the different seasons. Plymouth is a bit further on, so some days I would go to Plymouth and come back over the moor. Other days I would go across the moor. I got to know the seasons, the changes in weather. I went to the prison many times. I talked to people who'd worked there all their working lives, now retired. I researched the reason the town was built, the small town where the prison is. And yeah, sleeping on the moor, getting a feel of the code, bearing in mind there was no heating, no windows, just bars. And these guys, I don't know how they stayed alive. I honestly don't. I had clothes on, sleeping bag and everything else, but in a tent. But for people to actually be there with no money, no food, leaking roofs, condensation running down, they're all in hammocks, condensation running down the walls and freezing on the floor, quite horrific. And I'm amazed that anyone actually survived.
Yeah, just miserable. Gosh.
Yeah, of course, the other part of that story that you bring up, and I think is really kind of horrifically meaningful to us over here on this side of the pond, is that the American government didn't agree to pay to bring those sailors back.
That's right.
I know, that's horrible.
That's terrible.
You imagine being locked in a prison with guards that you just cannot get around. You don't want to.
The latest novel by author Graham Sclater is available now.
You don't want to be there. No one wants to be there. And and I'm amazed that they weren't repatriated, because 3 months, I wondered how long they would have kept them there had they not tried to get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think Carrie was trying to give us a sneak preview there.
Sorry about that.
Don't do that again.
I apologize, Ken.
It's a lot about.
No problem. So, Graham, one of the things that went on during that war, and that is kind of current here, so I thought I would segue into it, even though as a Brit you may not want to comment, is that during that war, there were battles around the Washington, D.C. area. In fact, there were 2 major land operations. One was the burning of Washington, and the other was, of course, the war, the great battle that it came after the war was ended, which, of course, is the Battle of New Orleans.
That's right, and they fired the guns and the British kept coming. Yeah, it's a very famous song, isn't it? But I think the British have said that you didn't know the war was over, or we knew the war was over and you didn't, hence the battle. But as we weren't there, who knows? Who knows?
Really, we weren't there.
The one that's controversial right now is Washington, because during that blockade, a song was written, and that song is now the national anthem of the United States.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the Star Spangled Banner was put together by a lady at just about that time, wasn't it?
Well,
She summed it up, I think, the first one.
Oh, you're talking about Betsy Ross? And
yes.
That was during the Revolution.
Oh, Revolution. Sorry. Yeah,
But,
I remember that, yeah.
But Francis Scott Key was trapped in a British boat, actually. he had gone to visit a friend of his who had been taken prisoner and then hadn't made the curfew or whatever and ended up spending the night on a British boat. And he wrote this hymn to basically to the flag, the battle flag, which of course is war, and I hate wars and I hate the idea that flags have to do with wars. But it also, and this is the thing that has now become so controversial, it is a paean to slavery.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you, as an author, have considered writing a novel, I'm giving you an idea here, my friend, about the British view of slavery during the time from just before the American Revolution on the Civil War. Because in Britain, of course, slavery was being abolished.
That's correct.
One of the reasons that the Americans rebelled. They wanted to keep their slaves, and Britain was saying basically there's no basis for slavery in common law. This is wrong. But there's this very strange connection that goes on over through, and of course gets to the issue of whether the British were going to recognize the South and all of these things. And I was wondering if you, as an English author, would care to write a book about that relationship from English point of view.
Well, in England, I mean, Bristol, which is a large city 80 miles from here, it is known that they made that city. Their wealth came from slavery. It's a big problem. But in Hatred is the Key, I did have one of the American characters who wasn't in the Navy. He had 3 slaves, didn't he? And 3 black slaves, which he lost control of when they ended up in the prison.
Right.
And he was treated the same as them. And that's where I put the irony into it, because he couldn't accept that he was the same as they were, i.e. a prisoner. And of course a couple of them die, and one survives, and it's a bit heavy, but that's the nearest I've probably got to it. The problem I got, Ken, is because I'm working on several projects, i.e. 2 new novels plus some film treatments. It's hard. I learnt a long time ago that unless the idea came to me, i.e. I hear something, see something, if it comes to me, it's like a germ in my brain, and it grows.
Well, I was trying to plant that germ just then.
I know you were. But because I didn't think of it, I actually find it incredibly difficult to move it forward, to get it to grow and ferment and whatever, and that is incredibly difficult for me to do. And as I'm getting on in years, hopefully lots more, I've got lots I want to write still. So with respect to drop into that, which would be a fantastic story, there'd be a lot of research for me to do, which would take me probably, I mean, Hatred is the Key was 15 years, just researching and writing and adding more and expanding. So 15 years to write that. I think if I wrote about the slavery, which is a fantastic idea, and I would interpose it, if you like, if that's the right word, intersect it, I suppose, with Bristol as the start. I probably would start it at Bristol with the old clippers coming in with slaves and everything else, and the wealthy people and the wealth they were generating from slaves, and then I would probably cut that then to America, or to America or even Africa, where the slaves came, and then send them to Jamaica for sugar canes, and then bring them back probably in the 50s. I would probably jump, because we had a lot of Jamaicans come into England in 1953 onwards, who ended up working on buses and everything else, and they really took over all the transport and the jobs that no one else wanted. But it was quite horrific at the time, because people, and I remember it, people didn't want them here. But of course, and they obviously originated from slaves. So there's a lot of stories and strands there, Ken, that I could go off and make it a sizable book, and probably go through different timelines to make it, modern, but also historic.
So, folks, now you have listened to and watched a really brilliant writer work. You see how his mind captures an idea and works with it. And that's why one of the things that makes Graham's books really good reading. Now, all of them haven't required quite as much research because some have been based more like Ticket to Ride on your own experience. I think Love Shack took some research, but not as much because, of course, it takes place in the European music world.
Yep.
And what kind of experience did you bring to Love Shack? Like that segue, Monica.
Lots. I toured with Fats Domino in 1979, and it was a 6 weeks tour, and the penultimate gig, which was in Amsterdam at the Concertgebouw, which is a beautiful classical hall, oak floors. The acoustics are fantastic. It's like a festival. You don't need microphones. We did with a band, but an orchestra can play there, and it's fantastic. Well, that night before we went across Amsterdam to the gig, the guitarist died from a heroin overdose. A gentleman called Roy Montrell, and he played on a lot of Little Richard's records, Jerry Lee Lewis. He was an original rock and roll guitarist. He died, and we found him naked in the bathroom in the hotel. So it always stuck in my mind, you know. I then had a band that I took over to Amsterdam a week after we got back, and I fell in love with the place. So I went back several times, and while I was working on the idea for Liam, Liam Riley, the Anglo-Irish guy, I thought he was an alcoholic. I thought, wouldn't it be great to put him in Amsterdam, running a bar and a brothel? So I went back again, doing the 4 seasons, so I could get the feel of the place. Very different. No, very few tourists at Christmas, New Year. And I was lucky enough to go out with the Zedenpolizei, which is the sex police, or sex squad, across Amsterdam. So I saw a lot of very horrific things, which I didn't put in the book, but it gave me the feel of it. And I think, you know, it's difficult getting the feel of something without actually going into mega detail, because I think a lot of people would be put off. My wife said she doesn't understand where I get the nastiness and horribleness from, if you like, the gore and things, but I had to put some of it in. So that's really the basis for that one. So it wasn't a lot of time, but of course it goes back to the death of Michael Collins, the IRA semi-leader. He was shot, and I put that at the beginning of the book as a prologue, really, just to set the feel, and I could move my characters then from Ireland to England. I wrote about the war and Dunkirk, evacuating the British soldiers, and in fact one of the generals said he didn't think he'd get more than 20,000 people back. But what we did, we got all the little fishing boats and yachts and everything else and barges, and we brought over 300,000 people back to fight again. So yes. I've got all that detail in there, and then of course I move it on 10-20 years, but I wanted to give the background to the family and why Liam had so many problems with, you know, alcohol, drugs, violence, crime. I wanted to set all that up before I put him in Amsterdam.
Yeah, he needed a reason to be in Amsterdam.
Yes. And if you remember what de Groot, who's the sort of leader of the underworld there, said, everyone in Amsterdam is here for a reason. They can't live anywhere else because, you know, they had major problems from wherever they came.
Yeah, I've noticed a number of the British noir books that I've read have Amsterdam as one of the settings, and I think it is certainly partly because of the sex, partly because of the drugs, and partly because it's Amsterdam. I've been to Amsterdam, and there's something about Amsterdam.
Magic. It's a magic place. You can. Yeah. I mean, it's changed a lot from. I was there in the '60s, and it's changed an awful lot since then. In many ways, it was better in the '60s because there was less inhibitions, believe it or not. Now I think they've got controls there. They've tidied up a lot of the parts that were really, really bad, and the red light district is closely monitored and licensed. Still got a lot of problems there. A lot of Eastern girls who are kidnapped and brought over, who work 21 hours a day, which is horrific, and they are prisoners. But it's changed a lot. But it's still a great place, fantastic, with all the canals and things.
Speaking of sex, which we just were,
oh yes,
I want to switch to your. I think it's your latest. Well, the latest released book, at least the one. We are More Than a Woman, the one that I most recently read.
Yeah.
By the way, folks, I'm only talking about Graham's books that I've read. There are a few that I haven't read, so I can't really get into. But yeah, More Than a Woman. Now that's very much about sex, but in some very unique ways.
Yes, and this morning at BBC, I was talking to the presenter, and he'd just read it. You see, now that was the idea for the interview this morning, and he said, "It's a difficult one, Graham." He said, "Because I don't want to give too much away." And I said, "Well, no, nor do I."
Right.
But I said the title is the key. More Than a Woman. That is the key. And he said he hated Julian Hamilton Lufton. He said, "I hated that man from the first page," and I said, "I hated him to the last page."
There was, if ever there was a hater, if ever there was a central character, I don't want to call him a protagonist, that I really dislike.
What someone said to me is you've got three antagonists in this. The protagonist really is, he's not there.
Yeah, there's nobody that you're rooting for. These are not nice people, which I don't, you manage, Graham, to write such nasty characters, and you yourself are such a sweetheart. How do you manage? What do? You have a switch in the back of your head?
I don't swear. I think my wife's only heard me swear once in 48 years of being married, and it wasn't at her. I think it was probably another driver. He was probably swearing at me as well. No, I don't have a nasty switch. I think you create. I mean, I've just done these creative talks on the cruise, and I think what it is that you come up against the character that you get to know, and you've got to put him in the position of people reading, wanting to hate him, and you want something to happen to him that is not good, if that makes sense. So, no, I don't. It's difficult. My wife, when she sort of reads things, she said, "You're swearing here. How can you write that if you don't swear it?" And I said, "Well, it's not me, you see.
It's your character. Your character is
Yes,
swearing.
Yes.
They would do that.
So again, we're back to this thing that you have this tremendous empathy and awareness of other people that seems to be the hallmark of your career, both as a writer and as creator or a publisher of music, and as just a friend, a person.
Well, I think, I mean, I can't put my finger on it. My dad died when I was 5, so that may have, but I don't think it does have anything to do with it. But also, I was a Samaritan for many years, and I think what's happened, I may not be right, but what I believe has happened, talking to so many people with problems, some very tiny, but to them they're huge. And I think being in that environment only one day a week for several years, and normally a Wednesday, it subconsciously goes in. So all these things then go around in your head. I read a lot. I do a book a month, as you know, book review a month. I'm writing my scripts. I think it's a combination of, over the years, of things I've seen, I've read, things that have happened to me, other people, and shocked by. Incidentally, reading the paper today here in England, there is a gentleman that's been mentioned in the paper. I think he's just been put in prison. He could be Julian to a T.
Oh my goodness.
As I'm reading the words and sentences, paragraphs, turning the page, 2.5 pages in the paper.
You created him.
Yes, I've created the monster. He was already there. But I mean, he is so much like him. But he's still alive. But yeah, so there are people out there, Ken, that so I think it's up in the air, in the ether somewhere, that these ideas come through, and what you do is you grow them, you keep watering them, and up they come.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna take a break right now. I'm gonna listen to a couple of trailers of Graham's books, so you can get kind of an idea. And you can find those on Amazon, of course, and absolutely Tabitha Books. And folks, get ready, and we'll be right back. You enjoy.
ultra-wealthy city financer Julian Hamilton Lufton has it all, but he chooses to abuse it. When he unexpectedly ends his illicit affair with a married woman, she is devastated and commits suicide. Will this provoke his earlier spurned conquest to return and wreak their revenge? This psychological thriller takes the reader to Seoul, the cosmetic surgery capital of the world, the financial world in the city of London, and deep into the underbelly of Bangkok and the world of the ladyboys. A chilling read, an intense and sophisticated thriller. Would revenge be sweet? Another well-plotted and researched novel from Sclater. More Than a Woman. The latest novel from Graham Sclater is available now from Tabitha Books or Amazon.
Everybody, I hope you enjoyed the book trailers that Graham has let us show to you. What a fabulous guy you are, Graham. You're a producer, you own a record company, you are an author, you are a screenwriter. What is your favorite thing to do, or do you like to do them all?
Oh, I like to do it all, but I say there is a why not or whatever. With music, I love music. I was a musician, as we said earlier, still am, I suppose. But the problem with music is you do rely on, if it's a band, you rely on a number of people. Mm-hmm. A big problem I've had over the last 40 odd years, 40 plus years, is working with bands that you're pushing them, promoting them, you're just about to do it. You've got your radio airplay, you're getting your interviews, and somebody leaves. Or the band breaks up. And I've really looked into this. My wife says, don't deal with musicians. I've had so many problems with them. The problem is really when a band get together, write their music, demo their music, they're all enthusiastic. But there is generally one or more people in that band who really want to be solo. They want to do their own thing. They want to take 100% of the receipts for CD sales, publishing, anything else. And so they're not in it for the right reasons. They're in it for their right reasons, but not for the band or for anyone that's working with them. And what happens, of course, is that they do literally fall apart. So I'm left having spent money, I've promoted them, I've got interviews booked, maybe videos. You've got no band. And I did it with CBS back in the 70s. I signed a £3 million deal, and they never even met the band until we signed the contracts. And they thought there was a girl in the band. There wasn't. The guy was 6'3", and what they wanted was a Bee Gees. They wanted a band like the Bee Gees to promote. We recorded, we had over here BBC were playing the record, they had interviews, sessions, you name it. We went off to Germany, Holland, Sweden, all over the place doing TVs. The singer said, I don't like that photograph, which was the promo photo. And I said, why not? He said, I should be in the front, I'm the singer.
Uh-huh.
And I said, but you're 6'3", the other lads are 5'8". He said, but I'm the singer. And we'd shot the photo in the Ritz in London, which was in an arched doorway. And if you'd have put him in the front, you wouldn't have seen the band. So he left. And did nothing afterwards. It just, I got a new singer in, I got a piano player, another guitarist, struggled on, put another record out through CBS. We actually were beating ABBA in a lot of the chart stuff, you know, at the time. And it literally fell apart. Gone. I had the same with a band that I took to Spain. We chartered our own plane to go to Spain. We had TV there, national TV, radio. Came back, the drummer phones the sub-publisher in Spain and the record label that I licensed it to and said, we're not dealing with Graham anymore.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so if you don't deal with Graham, and they were going to do a tour of the Bull Rings, which is something I'd always wanted to do. So she said, well, if you're not working with Graham, we don't want you. They fell apart. So many situations. So I love music, I love working with people, but they are notoriously unreliable once success, and success is measured in different ways, but once some sort of success comes in, and then you either have a band that falls apart or the singer wants to do it on his own, so you've got to get rid of the band and the singer and change all the deals and you know, and what it is with bands, you've got a magic. With the Beatles, I know they had Pete Best originally, but when Ringo joined, and Pete Best was playing in a band across the road in Hamburg from the Beatles. Well, Pete Best was with the Beatles in the Star Club,
Right.
and Ringo Starr was playing with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes across the road, and they all knew each other, and he actually joined the Beatles. But the Beatles were Ringo Starr, and people say he's not a good drummer, he's very good, but people say he's not. But when he joined, things took off. So having the right people when you're recording, little things that people add. It's like the programs that It Matters does. There's three of you. You all bring different things to the shows and the program, and it's a mix and it works. So once you take someone out of an equation in a group where you're writing, recording, performing, it just goes. But I still love it. But it's very, very frustrating. I'm very guarded now. I don't think I'd actually sign a band and spend a lot of money and time promoting it, because all the time I'd be thinking, when am I going to get that email or call?
Right.
Oh.
So what I mean, it's I'm always like this now, you know. I'm very, very nervy about it. But no, I love music. It probably is my first love, but writing is me. I mean, when I was songwriting, my wife said, and before we set up the company, I was songwriting and I did really well. I mean, I won stuff in Japan, France, Gibraltar, Ireland, Holland, not in Germany, not in America, things all over the world, you know. And I decided to stop songwriting and set up the company. And she always says, you should never have done that. But in 40 odd years, I've come a full circle. I'm now writing and I'm in control of my own destiny.
Right. Wait, it should be.
Which is where I want to be. But I still love music. I will work with people. If I like a good song or a singer or band, I will do everything I can to help them. But I know that at some point, sooner rather than later, it will go. Which is very sad.
I have to ask you, Graham, you worked in the 60s with a lot of famous people, and you've been in the music scene for so many years. What do you see is the main difference between people becoming artists now and back then, and how do we help them?
Now, I think, well, in fact, I know the business is in the worst situation or predicament than it's ever been. In the 60s, people wanted to be in bands. They would struggle, strive, they would do everything. They got them down the motorways, the freeways, doing gigs here, gigs there. That's all they wanted to do. If they made records, it's fantastic. If the records were successful, wonderful. And you can move on. Now, people are recording things. which is fine, on their own computers at home, you know, using various software now, recording in the bedroom, bathroom, wherever. But they're putting it straight onto YouTube and iTunes and Spotify. But no one knows who they are. There's a limited amount of airtime, exposure artists can have. And with so many people now, you know, sitting down and putting recording together, it's flooding the market, and there is no quality control anymore.
No.
And that is the problem.
You know, Graham, when you say that, I remember the old days in the 60s and 70s. I mean, the bands would give free concerts. They'd all get together, and they got a following. Then they'd release a record.
That's right.
Once they had the fans.
Yeah.
And they're like doing it backwards now.
Well, they're doing it backwards, and they're doing it without any fans, and they're also putting stuff out that isn't very good. Some of it's fantastic, but it's never going to be heard, and it clogs up the system.
Right.
You know, there is just too much there, and you know, you can do Facebook and do all these various things, SoundCloud and whatever, but you know, it only hits a few people. You've got to believe in your music. Get out and play, as you said, Monica. Build up an audience, because that's the only way you can gauge if what you're playing is of interest to people.
Right.
Because if you play something and it doesn't go down too well, you think, well, we won't bother to record that. But now they record it before they go and do the odd gig, if they do any gigs.
Right. Now you are gonna share some music with us today. We're gonna play it in a little bit.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the performers.
Okay, well, you've got several there. I'm not sure what you're going to play. So give me a clue if you can. If not, I'll busk it.
Colin Wilson's Cloudburst is one, which is fabulous song.
Right, now, Colin Wilson was the first artist we signed in 1975. And that track is the first song I heard of his. And it's the title of the album. It was Tab 101. And it was vinyl then. They're now, if you can get them, they're about $300 if you can get them.
Wow. We're so fortunate to bring it to everybody today then.
Yes.
Yeah. But Cloudburst is a great track, and because of that, we actually set up the company. That was the reason, because his manager came twice to us. The first time I sent him away, he said, look, we've got these tapes, he said, and you're the only person in this part of the country, which is, you know, big area, that is doing anything in music. I said, but I'm a songwriter. I've got my studio, I'm producing, and recording and writing. I don't really want to. And he went, I said, I'm sorry. And he went away. 2 months later, and I remember it was near my birthday in November, he knocked on the door again. And he had these tapes under his arm. And he said, sorry to come back, but I don't know what to do. So I played them again. I said, okay, I'll set up Tabitha. My friend did the first little bit of artwork. We put it all together, and out it went. And I stopped songwriting soon after. So, you know, my interview with Ken earlier, I mean, it's come a full circle, which is wonderful. So, right. Colin Wilson, that's the first song we've released with him. Probably about 8 CDs now. Because he stopped writing for a while, but he's got a little trio, almost acoustic, called the Boys from Melbourne Street. Cloudburst he still plays, and he's still a friend. I was best man at his wedding. So he's been with me from day one, and I do a radio show with him. So Cloudburst, yeah, perfect. It's Tab 101. That's the first song on the first album we released.
Right, that's such a cool song. How about Hanging by a Thread, Red Eye? That's another great song.
Yeah, Hanging by a Thread. Now, Red Eye is very, very close to my heart. I was judging a final of the talent competition, and they were one of the bands, and the agent who put it all together came up to me at the end, me and my wife, and he said, Graham, have a listen to this demo. I don't know if it's any good or not. So I listened to it, I liked it, and I went to the band's rehearsals. I went to so many rehearsals. I went to loads and loads of rehearsals, and I said, we'll make an album. I found out later that the singer in the band was the agent's son. He didn't want to tell me in case I didn't like it, or liked it because it's... And we're only talking about him today. But interestingly, when that song was recorded, It's recorded up on Dartmoor, where the prison is.
Mhm.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, and I realised while I was mixing that song, I'm playing organ on it as well. I played on a lot of their tracks. When I was mixing that, I realised that I wasn't well. And 2 days later, I found out I had kidney cancer.
Oh dear.
So that again is something that's very important to me. It's it's so relevant, you know. And I remember having the operation in September, 2 weeks' time, the 22nd of September 2004. And I was in the studio. I went to London with them to some gigs in the van 2 months after my operation. I went up on the train and came back in the van. Sorry, I'll get that right. Up on the train and came back in their van at like 4 in the morning, and the van was shaking, and I was in agony, you know. But yeah, so they're a local band, great band. No More Again. The singer, very foolishly, had a business valeting cars, and they had a very, very, very expensive car in there to be valeted.
Mm-hmm.
He took it out for a spin with one of his engineers. Didn't realise it accelerated like it did. Smashed 3 cars.
Oh no.
The car completely, and broke his leg.
Oh dear.
He was sued and he lost his business, and he decided that he couldn't go on with the band.
Oh.
Oh wow.
Stories everywhere. It's ridiculous.
I love it.
Reminds me of
Absolutely.
the
Well, I tell
characters
you what.
in
Go ahead.
Ride.
I just wanted to do one more song because I think it's my personal
Well,
favorite.
Carrie,
John.
I'd
But
like
we
to
can
take
come back.
Carrie, I'd like to take a break right now and
Sure.
play these 2 songs, and then we'll
Sure.
come back and we'll talk
Sure.
about the other 2, okay? Here you
All
go,
right.
folks. You're going to love it, especially after hearing the stories behind them. We'll be right back.
My life is hanging by a thread. Can you help me to take the pain away from me? I need someone to leave me all alone. Yeah. Am I flying just like a butterfly? Butterfly, 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 fly, fly. Do you hear this? Or are you out of time with me? I'm alone now to face it all again. Yeah. Can you help me to take the pain away from me? I'm tired. These chains from round my mind. Yeah. Round my mind. Round my mind, mind, mind. Am I here? Are you near? Can you take me anywhere? I need something, yeah. Can you feel? Is it real? I need someone to show me the easy way
that second song it was like it just came right out of the story behind it, came right out of Ticket to Ride.
Yeah, it did. And I think in Love Shack, I did give my Liam a bit of a problem that I had. He was in the prison.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yes.
And you're going to have to read the book to find out what that is.
Yes, you have to read all his books.
That's right.
Let's talk about some more music here.
Yeah, Carrie.
I just love this song, Graham. I probably shouldn't have picked a favorite, but my favorite is No More Crying by the Meteors. I want you to talk a little bit about the band and the music.
Yeah, well, this is another story, but it's wonderful. In one of the bands, the Manchester Playboys, that I was in Germany with, I joined the band just after the drummer, and I joined them in Hamburg actually in 1967. May, I know it was May because it was a swap over, and I met my wife in September of the same year. The drummer in the band was called Pete Semensky. Lovely lad. And that's 67, 68. I left the band in 68 and got married. He left as well. I'd say later. 2001, I phoned him. I've met him several times since in Manchester and in London. We were doing TV shows and I invited him and his wife along to come, as guests. And for some reason I phoned him up and I said, "Hi Pete, what are you doing?" He said, and he's very shy. He said, "Well, I've written a few songs, recorded a few songs with a friend of mine." My son laughs at me all the time. He thinks I'm rubbish, as family often do. I said, "Send me a couple." And that was one of them. He sent me about 40 songs. So what we did is we released 2 albums. And that is one of the songs. And I think the lyrics are wonderful. It almost brings a tear to my eye when I listen to it. And it was possibly a title for a book in the future, because I like to use song titles, you see, as you know. So I think it's a wonderful song. And yeah, Pete is still writing. He lives in Manchester, which is a long way from us. But we still keep in touch. And we've got lots of plays from their music. But it's very, very different.
It is. It's great.
It's a friend of his who worked with a lot of the big stars over here. I'm trying to think who you had in America. 10cc. Have you heard of 10cc?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, he worked with them in the Strawberry Studios in Manchester, which is where they recorded all that. He was a session player there, and he recorded a lot of records. That was the keyboard player. So it's Pete and him. Pete used to be in a band called the Meteors when he was 14. And they played with the Rolling Stones in Manchester in a little club. And I've got a poster of the Rolling Stones, Decca recording artists, and at the bottom, the Meteors.
Oh, that's very cool. So, Too Big to Cry, MXT. That is another great song.
Yeah, now this is a reggae artist. He's a white. He also does a Michael Jackson tribute act, which is very, very good. And of course, the voice is very much like Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
MXT, I signed him through a promotional friend of mine who was doing radio, and I went to meet him in Birmingham. It's called Michael, but MXT is what he likes to be called. And he played me this song. I went to see him at his home. Very little money, didn't have a job, a couple of kiddies, struggling, but determined to just make music. We signed that song. I had it remastered, and I used that for the title of one of my novels, Too Big to Cry.
Yes, you did.
Yes, you did.
I sent that CD out with the book to a lot of the radio stations. It's got a lot of plays, and it was good for me, good for him. We did sign some other songs, but unfortunately, with the Michael Jackson tribute act, he decided that he didn't really want to promote MXT as such, but recently he's been in contact again. He's working with a band here called UB40 and some of the Jamaican reggae singers. He's very well respected with them.
Love reggae. Just love it.
And it's possible that he will go in I booked the studios and everything for him, and he said, "Well, I can't afford to get there." And I thought, well, you know, I'm paying for the studio time and the musicians. If you can't get some money together to get to the studio, am I wasting my money?
Hmm.
You understand that? So, yeah, he didn't go and I cancelled the sessions. But, yeah, brilliant track. Love it. Love his voice. Nice guy. He could and should be a star, without a doubt.
Do you think
Right.
he'll continue when he gets money together, or hard to say?
I think, Monica, I mean, you've written novels which I've read and know Ken. I mean, we all do it. I believe there is a time for things.
Mhm.
And we don't know what that time is or when it is. And I think if you have an opportunity, you've got to grab it. And he really should have
He should have
got
grabbed
some.
it then.
Yeah, I'm not
Done
saying it would
whatever
have
it
been
taken.
exactly because it's there. Now, you know, a year, 2 years later, you look back and think, well, if only. But the
Yeah.
if only, you know, you can't resurrect something because, you know, you're keen on artists that you're working with and people and things that you do. But if they let you down, you think, well, hang on, are they going to let me down for the next interview? Are they going to be there? And that's what happens, isn't it? They're just not there. They forget
Yes.
about it. I
No,
thought it was
it
next
does
year.
happen. You know, it's interesting because you say how much money you've put in to promote artists and how much time and effort, and they're not grateful. In
No,
fact, not all
no.
of them, I shouldn't say, but they're kind of the opposite. It's all about them. And I
Yes.
think the most successful artists are the ones that realize you have to be humble, you have to be grateful, you have to thank those people who helped you along the way.
But the problem is they lose perspective.
Yeah.
They think that this guy in England or in Exeter, if he can do it, anyone can do it. They don't really. You see, when you're working with artists and you get, you know, turn downs from stations, or you go to major record labels or TVs and you say, "I love this. Listen to this," and they say it's rubbish. Well, if I was to tell the artist what I've been told every time, they give in. So you take that. So they assume that you're not doing anything for them. You
Right.
see, if you feed them the negatives and the positives, they hear the negatives. They think, well, no, we'll pack it in. So it's a very fine line, and that is what happens. So they think you're not doing enough for us because you're not getting positive results every day. You can lie to them, which is pointless because you're not
It,
going to pull anything off.
when they should be looking at what they can do to improve, you're giving them the
Yes.
feedback you're getting. So maybe if they change just a little bit, I mean, it's just like when someone edits a novel. You know, it might have sounded great when you wrote it, but oops, now it doesn't. So, you got to do something to change that,
Well,
You know,
that's right. But if it's too easy, you see, I work with people and I will try because of, you know, going back to Samaritans and things, because I know how close people are sometimes to the edge. If you think of an iceberg, when you look at anyone or talk to anyone, you only see that top 10%.
Yeah.
You don't know what's happened under that water. You
No.
don't know whether they've had a row with their wives, whether their dogs just died, or there's been a problem here, or they've lost their job. You don't know any of that. So,
No.
you know, and I'm more empathetic than I should be. That's the problem, because I understand, I get those vibes, I feel it, and I think, well, hang on, I didn't tell them they've been turned down again,
Yeah.
and
but
that's
there is something about being an adult that's involved here, and a lot of artists have trouble being adults. And the hallmark of an adult is we show up.
yes,
And a lot of these people, just a lot of people, whether it's writers or musicians or whatever, and certainly we know that from scheduling interviews on It Matters Radio, some people just don't have the capacity to show up.
that's right.
They're
And
not
if
yeah.
that's right. And if they don't, Ken, then really, you and I and anyone and Monica, you know that, you know, really, we're all wasting our time with those people. And
Yes.
my philosophy, I mean, I met Elton John in Hamburg when he's the same age as me, when he was 17, playing a band called Bluesology, a London band. He used my organ for the month because there wasn't enough room on the stage. I then built up a relationship. I met him 4 or 5 years later and started working with him and John Reed, his manager, and doing lots of things. But there's one thing about Elton John. People say he's not a nice guy, but he is dedicated. And if you say, I want you there at 3 o'clock in the morning, he's there at 5 to 3 in the morning. if you say, I'm sorry, but you're here now, but we're delayed, got technical problems or whatever, he'd go off, but he'd be back when you wanted him. Most artists would swear, throw a tantrum, and walk off. The people that make it are the people that are reliable. They don't have to be the most talented in the world. I say that to anybody. You don't have to be the best. You've got to be reliable and deal with things as and when people click their fingers, because they know you're reliable. They'll always book you in rather than people that are better who may not turn up.
No, you're right.
Show up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I have to say, Graham, that it must be so hard. I mean, you've done this for 40 years. Do you ever just want to, and I know you expressed some of your anxiety about it, but do you ever just want to throw up your hands and say, frickin', you know what, and go on to something else?
Well, to a point, I've done that, because if I sign anything now, I work very hard with it. And obviously, if it takes off, we continue to work. If it doesn't, you can only do so much for so long. And I do want to increase and improve and write more books and things like that, because it's me. I can do it. It's my time. And if I sit here at the computer and waste my time doodling on a bit of paper, it's my time. If I'm promoting an artist and they don't turn up, they let me down, they cause all sorts of problems, I've lost time. I don't feel well because of it. My wife's annoyed with me. And you think, well, are they going to turn up the next time? I mean, I had one band that we had a session book who were played every day on BBC Radio nationally. And I booked them a session with the BBC, 3 hours to re-record the song. I hired a van, went to pick them up. They're all in bed.
Oh my gosh.
All in bed. So I got them out. We drove to London, which was 4.5 hours.
Sorry.
Got to the studio, BBC Studios at Maida Vale, and we walked in the door, and the engineer turned, half looked at me. Can't do it. I've never recorded it in an hour and a half. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he was the keyboard player in a band called Shack Attack, which have a lot of hits in England. But he also freelanced at the BBC because he loved engineering. He said, all right, Graham, didn't realise it was you. If they can do it in an hour and a half, we'll do it. They did, and we got away with it. But had I not been there, A, they wouldn't have turned up,
Right.
but B, they would have done the recording, So people just don't appreciate how hard others work for their benefit.
Well, I hope some of the musicians and artists and such and writers, whoever that are listening to this show or live or are going to watch it on YouTube, look at this and understand that you need to show gratitude. That's such an important part. And without all these other people assisting you along the way, you're not going to make it.
They won't make it. No, but because the internet is so instant, I think they think they've made it when their song is on iTunes.
Yeah.
Even though the one who clicked on it is their mother.
What'd you say, Kid?
I said, even if the only one who clicked on it is their mother. I bet somebody listened to my song.
And the problem is, you see, that if they've done that and they've set it up on iTunes and Spotify, A, they're not going to get any royalties because they haven't got 99 times in 100. They say they're a company, they're a publisher, they're a record label.
Yeah.
They've got nothing. They don't own any royalties.
Yeah.
They're never going to get anything. So what is the point? It's too late because you have to metadata the songs, you see. So if they're not metadata and tagged, they're not going to get anything anyway.
And Graham, I have to say that there's people like yourself with Tabitha Records and like music and film.
Yeah, yeah.
And that whole group, World Music Stage and such, that work very, very hard. But if people want to be part of this, they have to work hard too. And they have to invest a little bit in themselves.
Very much so.
And I also think that when you do a little bit of investment in yourself, you're going to work because you spent your hard-earned money. These people that think they can make it without any marketing or anything at all.
Mm.
They're just not going to. It's too
No, you're
difficult.
dead right. I mean, you're right. There's a certain thing. If they put a bit of equity into it,
Yes.
then yeah, they can get a higher percentage. You can do deals where they own more. But what most of them forget: if I earn, they earn. If they don't earn, I don't earn.
Right.
Right.
They don't understand that.
Well,
The trials and tribulations of being a music publisher and
Producer, yeah.
so,
I love it, and I know that anything is possible, and that is the reason I still do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Carrie, you're right. I mean, yes, I do get days when I think, look, I don't care, but of course they sign their songs to our company,
Right.
so I can't not promote them because it's wrong for me, it's wrong for them as well, And
Right.
if you own the copyright, which effectively we do, and we're not promoting it, then we shouldn't own the copyrights.
Right. You're
Right.
not doing your job.
you're
right.
cheating them as well as yourself. But
Yeah.
then you see, you're the kind of guy who shows up.
Exactly. Yeah.
speaking of showing up, Graham, is there any bands that you're working with now that you have high hopes and that are going to stay with you, or?
Well, I'm working with. I mean, David Cooler, I think, is great.
Oh, yeah.
But again, he's so far away, and he's a great guitar. I mean, he should be successful, but it's logistically impossible. I mean, he said Brad Tucker's the same. They said we'd love to come to England. I could bring or they could come to England. I wouldn't bring them, but they could come to England. But the dates they would do would be so small. Then I'd be embarrassed to take them into a place with 50 people.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? Because their expectations of coming to play in England, they'd expect the place to be full. But you've got, like you said earlier, Monica, you've got to build up
Right.
the
Your
time.
fan base. And
Yeah,
that's
the
what
place
you're
that-
doing. You're doing
Yeah.
it the smart way. I mean,
That's right. I mean, and when the police came to America, I mean, they toured America for a year,
yeah.
Mhm.
playing wherever
Exactly.
they could, and
And
it
place
worked.
they could get a gig, they played.
Yeah,
course.
and that is the way to do it.
And Graham, the fact that what you and music and film and Tabitha Records and such, you're taking them internationally.
Yes.
And they don't realize what it's over 250,000 radio stations they're being heard on. I mean,
They don't, because I've even had people phone me from around the world that have got their songs and said, when are we on the radio? When were we played? Who played us? What time was it? And I'm thinking, but what? Nobody knows that anymore because you have the pre-recorded shows. They put them out
Exactly.
again. They're going to play it. They play it an hour later. They don't play it at all because they've lost the MP3. You know what I mean? But people actually ask that. When was I played? What time was I played? And where,
Well, they're
Well, they
being
ask
played.
That question
Absolutely.
all the time. But of course, we are more able because we're just our own program. Monica can control all of that for
Right.
us.
Right.
which is wonder. And Joe Symes and some of the bands from England you play. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, it's one, and they appreciate it. But those guys, I don't know if you play. Do you play Willie Bo Walker? Do you play him or not?
Yes.
No?
Yes, we love
Yes.
Willie Bear.
Yeah. Well, those two, Joe. I mean, those guys. I mean, I've got to say it. Are working so hard. They're
Right.
promoting. They're doing gigs. I mean, they are the opposite to what we've been talking about.
Right.
And they deserve to make it. And I tell you what, they probably will. But,
think so.
the way they're going to make it is selling out at gigs where they can sell merchandise, CDs, T-shirts. That's money in their pocket.
Right.
So, you are doing the groundwork for them. They are doing the groundwork for gigs and appearances. They're promoting themselves like mad. Wonderful. That's exactly what bands should be doing. But a lot won't. And
Right.
that's the issue.
Well, I think they should listen to words of wisdom for someone who's been in the industry a long time. I mean, you know it in and out. So, I'm so,
Backwards and forwards.
yeah.
Yeah, and anything is honestly anything. The right song, is a way you make it.
Yeah.
I really believe that, but you've got to have the people to back it up. Otherwise, you're going nowhere. And radio, with the BBC especially, they are like that now. They want to know what the bands are doing. They have these meetings every fortnight. They put 1 or 2 new tracks a month on the station, because there's so many old stuff and name stuff coming out. So new artists, maybe 1 or 2 in a month, and they'll give them spot plays to see what the DJs think and if they get any emails or phone calls about the band, and then they'll get more, and then maybe get the odd TV show, national TV show. But it's so hard to do it. So with so few bands getting on there, it's like trying to win the lottery, you know. And
Exactly.
but Willie Bow Walker and Joe Sykes, I think they've got a chance because they're out there, they're recognisable, they're known. They've done quite a lot of BBC interviews. I know they have, especially up at Liverpool with Billy Butler and people like that.
Yes.
So they are doing interviews and they're doing gigs, and yeah, I think they're going the right way. And I wouldn't surprise me if they're not very successful, but it will need the airplay and then the gigs, build it up, CDs, real CDs, which is generally what we would put out. And I'm sure that will all come as well. But yeah, it's amazing. I just came up with those, but they are the way to go.
Absolutely. Well, Graham, we've run out of time, but I want to remind everyone to please check out Tabitha Records and Tabitha Books. Like Graham on Facebook. Any other places you'd like him to check Amazon?
Well, go to Amazon. Look for Graham Sclater.
Yeah, Amazon. I mean, Amazon for books and CDs and downloads and things like that. They're all there. And my books, Tabitha Books, or Amazon for books as well. Yeah. Just spell my name. It's Sclater. That's Sclater.
Sclater.
And thank you so much for having me on again. I hope I haven't been too depressing.
Not at all. You just
fun for it.
I want people to hear reality, and they need to, Graham. And I thank you for taking the time to really tell them what it's like and what they need to do. It's because you care.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, Graham, take care. And I know we want you to come back and visit us again and let us know when you got that new book.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Bye.
And Ken's going to edit the next one for me.
That's correct.
That's
I did
right.
promise I would take an editing pen and get all of those British spellings out, right?
No, you won't.
Just kidding.
He's bad.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome,
Thank you,
Graham.
Graham.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, gosh, guys. He's so
Oh,
delightful, isn't he?
He is.
I just love Graham. We're going to play a couple more songs, guys, from two of the last bands that Carrie and Graham discussed.
Right.
And I hope you enjoy them. And I also hope you'll check in later tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where Ken Ween and I will be introducing you to our spoken word guest.
Yeah.
Until then, guys, goodbye and enjoy this music. Good night.
Bye.
Another day, the shadows are gone. Fear and hate disappears with the dawn. Let them roar, let them rage. We're heading for a whole new age. We can say there'll be no more crying tonight. Minds can change and people can grow. sun with hearts made of stone. Too much pain, too much hurt, too many lying in the dirt. We must say there'll be no more crying tonight. Look around, it's a different place. Say a prayer for the human race. Count the cost, the battle is won. So much work remains to be done. In our hearts a flame burns bright, and out of darkness comes the light. So we can say there'll be no more crying tonight. There'll be no more crying. 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 There'll be no more crying.
youths are love to play with them life. Walk up on the streets and cause grief and strife. No matter what you do, no matter what you try to say, all they want to do is beat you up and run away. One fine day it'll go turn around, when you find yourself looking up from the ground. And when you cry for help, no one will hear your sound. It's true, people say what you give up comes back around.
No man is too